I have to say, while we're waiting for people to come in, Farhat, that
Yes, definitely.
this is so much fun.
This is so much fun. Yes, welcome everybody whosoever has joined us from across the world. Global Women Insight. We are here together for another amazing, perfectly amazing episode of Global Women Insight. We'll be waiting for a few more minutes so that people from across the world will be joining us. I will begin in a minute. And those who would like to are attending, they can also share their names, their places, and of course they can share their brief introduction as well, so that we can begin and know that where you're from and where you're coming from. We'll just wait for a few more minutes. This exclusive Global Women Insight episode we are in conversation with Nobel Peace Laureate Leymah Gbowee, and then we'll be having this exclusive conversation. And I'm so honored that today I'm sharing the stage with the Honorable Ambassador Swanee.
Thanks, Farhat.
There's a lot of wonderful people have been joining us from across the world, Swanee, and let us begin. Why not? What do you think? Yeah, let's formally begin.
Sure. But
good.
Yeah. Farhat, you can see things that we can't. Can you tell us about people who are coming in?
Yes, there are people. I guess there are people from New York, of course, Ukraine. Anjum Ali from Virginia. Welcome to the conversation. Chicago. Oh, South Africa. Greetings from South Africa. Kenya. Someone has joined us from Kenya as well. New York. From Pakistan. Wonderful. Good to have you.
Nigeria.
From Israel. Yes.
Liberia, Nigeria.
Yeah. Someone has joined us from Double Smile Again Foundation, which is wonderful work that you've been doing on related to the acid victims in Pakistan. Acid attack victims. Wonderful. Wow. So many people. From Liberia, of course. From Colombia, New York, Islamabad, and then Washington, Ohio, Virginia, Boston, Colorado. Oh my God, and someone from UN as well. Canada, of course. Welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. This is something amazing that we are hosting such an important conversation, and something that I always look forward to for the last almost 9 years. However, good evening and good afternoon to our participants from across the world. My name is Farhat Asif. I am the founder, president of Institute of Peace and Diplomatic Studies, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Institute and of course, Inclusive Security, which is located in Washington, D.C., and I'm talking from Islamabad, Pakistan. We warmly welcome you all to this exclusive episode of Global Women Insight. Ladies and gentlemen, Global Women Insight is a digital series of conversation with an extraordinary woman from across the world to share insight on leaderships and pressing issues faced by women in this contemporary world. Institute of Peace and Diplomatic Studies is a non-profit think and do tank. We specialize in leadership, peace building, and diplomacy. At the Institute, we have established the Center for Women, Peace and Leadership, an academic and training center for excellence inaugurated by Nobel Peace Laureate Mrs. Tawakul Abdul Salam Karman from Yemen. I'm honored that tonight our guest is Excellency Nobel Peace Laureate Leymah Gbowee, and I'm also honored that tonight I'm sharing the stage with one of my sweetest mentor and great mentor, Honorable Ambassador Swanee, who is the Eleanor Roosevelt Lecturer in Public Diplomacy and the founder of the Women and Public Policy Program at Harvard Kennedy School of Government, and she also chairs the Washington-based Institute for Inclusive Security. And Swanee's ambassador's whose goal was to transform the decision-making table and decision-making structures about war and peace. And Ambassador Hunt was U.S. Ambassador to Austria. Swanee?
Yes, thank you. And by the way, we are among friends, and so I hope that you will call me Swanee.
Yes, I do.
Use the Ambassador Hunt part. It makes me nervous. So it makes me feel like I need to be more careful about what I'm saying. Because what I want to say is being in the presence of Leymah Gbowee, Farhat, just being with you again after, see, it was in 2011,
June.
right? When we were together in DC. And I remember it so well. My husband had just died. And I was thinking, I was standing there with you, and I was thinking how important that meeting was to him, because he was the force behind what I was doing. It was actually his idea to even begin what became inclusive security. And you came with some other women leaders from Pakistan, and you were chosen. I know all this background that you don't know. You were chosen because you were at that time clearly a major force about to become an even more powerful force, whether it was with formal authority or whether informal authority. You're articulate, you're smart, you're imaginative. And when I think about who I want to be like when I grow up, it's you. And so thank you very, very much for allowing me to be here today. And you have played a real a real role in your country in terms of the whole commitment to peace. I've been in Pakistan many times, including during the Taliban times, and seen how difficult it is, and the importance of someone like you there. And Leymah, if I may call you Leymah, I don't have to call you like prize winner Leymah.
No, please don't. I would just run away from this Zoom conference and disappoint all of the guests. Leymah is fine. It's perfect. That was the name that was given to me at birth. So it captures everything that God has blessed me with. So yeah.
Leymah and we've known each other for many years. And Leymah, your head must have been swimming when you were in Oslo receiving the Nobel Peace Prize. I was in the audience. I think I was on the fourth row cheering when you went forward. And we saw each other the next morning at the hotel over breakfast. And I have to say, you were glowing. And the glow wasn't because of the prize. The glow was because what you represented in terms of Liberia, but also as daughter of the continent. And I have known you in each of those contexts, but Leymah, it's more now. And you didn't say that I should say this, but you really are a global citizen. There are very, very few people I would say that about. But Leymah, I've worked in 60 countries, and in 55 of those countries, they're talking about Leymah Gbowee. So I don't know if you walk around knowing that. I don't know what it's like to have 8 children and try to know anything else other than what it's like, like who has a toothache and, who's upset because the boyfriend, et cetera. But you're not thinking about those things. I want you to lie in bed thinking, I'm making a difference. I'm making a difference all around the world. And so people who don't know much about Leymah Gbowee, Google her. I mean, I said, Leymah, when I introduce you, I have a list. I mean, I have a list that looks like this. I don't know if you can see this, but anyway, that's her accomplishments. And so I said, look, what do you want me to say about this? And she said, I don't want you to say anything about this. She said, it's boring. I know exactly what you mean, because this isn't Leymah. This isn't Leymah. This is a list of the ways that you've been honored, the high-level panels, the on and on and on. And so I think that people will Google you. They'll look on Wikipedia. They'll go to your Facebook page where you are keeping this really, really interesting personal blog. But what they're really going to see today is the Leymah Gbowee who isn't on this piece of paper. And Farhat and I have talked a lot about what we can do to make sure that we get beyond the piece of paper. And so we're going to have a great time. And
I hope I came for a great time. Let's do it, girls.
let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Leymah, I mean, to just begin with, I mean, thank you so much, Swanee, for such a, you know, another piece of paper, another piece of paper introduction, which is just beyond that. And you know, Leymah, back in 2011, when I was there, when I was first expecting my child, I saw your story there right in front of me unfolding. And I was sitting there in a workshop hosted by Inclusive Security in Pakistan. And I still remember the feeling when I was looking at those stories, and I could not stop thinking from that and inspiring from you till that day, till now. And you know what? I always followed you wherever you go. I mean, I just shared with you that how we used to talk a lot about you when I was there in Canada for a wonderful leadership fellowship there in Coady Institute, and my mentor will be here as well. And I could not stop thinking and talking about you. And I was thinking that one day before I die, I will definitely meet this woman. I will be asking her, how did this all happen? How this story began? And what are those important pivotal moments in your journey or all these years? Please share with us.
Thank you, Farhat. Thank you, Swanee, for inviting me. And thank you to all of the panelists. I see some of my good friends from Abuja, from Liberia, from different New York, Kenya, all different parts of the world. You know, I can't definitely talk about my journey without talking about my socialization. And I think this is where we miss the mark when we begin to read books from the chapter of success. I grew up in a community in Liberia that I would call a urbanized slum. It wasn't fancy, but it was a community in the real sense of the word. And in that community, we had both Christians and Muslims. And our growing up years was years shared between Islamic holidays and Christian holidays, and our years were shared. The way my sister and I describe it in our latter years is that we grew up in a bubble. Most times they say rich people grew up in bubble, but I think even in our little, we grew up in a bubble. And the bubble was that we did not know who didn't have, because everyone shared food, everyone shared everything. And when you went to a neighbor's house, they bathed you as a child and send you back home to your parents. So the way I would call it is that my growing up years was the year that entrenched the mindset of our collective humanity, you know, and so that's one point. And then that socialization stayed with me until the war. And you know, if you've been socialized to believe that you're one people, no difference, and all of a sudden there's this war where then they start to separate, oh, this ethnic group is this and that ethnic group, there's a confusion in the mind of a 17-year-old. And in most cases, if you don't manage that, you go overboard. And my overboard was anger. I was very angry from that 17 years old because first I was angry at the individuals who promised me that the young would be protected, the women and children would be protected, and they will not be preyed on. And everything that we're seeing during the war years was the opposite of what we have been socialized to believe. And so then the second thing that happened in the midst of joy came anger, intense hatred. And I name these three things because it will come back to be the three things that will help to shape the story. That is the collective humanity, the anger, and the hatred. And so at some point, I started doing this work that I needed to do to get back on my feet. And the first people that I had to work with were ex-child soldiers who I hated. And the way I would tell this story is that God has a sense of humor because he uses the things that we despise to help to shape us. It's either whip us in shape, and when I refer to God, it can be whoever you believe your higher power to be. I'm a Christian. And so as I hated this group, I had to work with them. I had to create or learn to tolerate them. So that hatred, I needed it to be upset to deal with them. Then I needed it to be able to do an analysis of these people and get to understand them. And then I needed it now to start thinking, how do I work with these people, or how do I work beyond this group of people? And then once I started working with these child soldiers, I wanted to know the women that they were married to. Some of them had wives and children very early on. And then I went to meet these women. And I mean, my journey was just very fast, like on a roller coaster. Next thing, I was working with women in the security sector. And then, but the one thing that I would like to say is that the dots connected. The dots connected. And what I brought, even in the midst of the work that I did, was my socialization. It never left me. So even in the anger and the hatred, there was always this tiny shining light that said, regardless of how you feel about these people, you have to consider that you all share one humanity. The anger was the fuel that I needed to think through all of the things. And I tell people, anger is neither good nor bad. Anger is like fluid, like this glass of water. If I take this water in this glass and put it in another container, it takes the shape of that container. So anger is like this. Depending on how you transform or where you pour your anger, that's how you will be remembered, either as a villain or a hero. And I know I was an angry person, but I wanted to use my anger to transform things. And that's where it all started from. I'm trying to give you over 25 years in 3 minutes.
Thank you so much for this inspirational journey. In fact, you had connected those dots. Those dots remain always important in women's lives, those who are rebuilding or transforming in any society, be that Liberia, be that in Pakistan, be that in Afghanistan. You transform that anger and anxiety that you have, you transform that into something extraordinary. Thank you so much for letting us into and connecting those dots. And those pivotal moments in your life that over these years, what were those? I mean, and over the time period, these pivotal moments where you built your own journey. As you said, it was a roller coaster, and then at the same time, when you are moving towards that roller coaster, there are some people who are always there for you. Those are important mentors in your life. When you are struggling, there are people who are there to uplift you. They might be men, they might be women. Who were those people who help you to navigate through all those struggles in life? The pivotal moments, and then of course those mentors in your life.
So one of the things that I often say is that my 101 feminism was taught to me by my grandmother. She's about 115 years old and she's still alive today. My grandmother is that person. We were 5 daughters of our parents and we had no brothers. So at a very early age, it became very clear that she would push us to doing things that I today now describe as learning to dominate my space. You see, most of the time, girls are socialized or trained or brought up to believe that they need a man to fight for them, to back them up, to do this. Every time we would come and say someone hit us, she'd say, go back and fight for yourself. You don't have a brother to fight for you. And then she started giving us coins to say, invest your coins, make candy and sell, do this, do that. And today, when I look back at everything that we were taught by this woman to do, it was basically telling us that this is where you are, God, where you're sitting, where I'm sitting, where Swanee is sitting, is the space that we've gotten in this life. And if you don't learn to command and dominate your space, someone is going to come and command and dominate your space for you. So that was the first lesson that I learned. The second group of people were a group of refugee women from Sierra Leone. Early on during the war in Liberia and Sierra Leone, there was this group of women who were refugees, and I used to work with them as a community volunteer. There was always this excitement about going back to their country and contributing. What was amazing for me, or what was a bit disturbing for me at the time, in all of my ignorance, where all of these women had a kind of physical disability. All of them had been raped. All of them had been abused. One person had one breast cut off. But these women will still sit in that refugee camp under the tent and still plan that when they go back, they were going to transform their society. And I always had this cynical look about the way they were talking. I was angry. I was angry about the war in Liberia. I was angry about the treatment of women. One day they asked me, were you ever raped? And I said, no. Did you get part of your body mutilated? No. And then they really schooled me on how it's important for women to have this outlook, and that women could do whatever they wanted to do. And even in pain, we could transform. That was the second group of people. The third group, I would say, are those women, older women, when we started the mass action campaign, who came from the Christian and Muslim religious groups, who just had confidence in my ability when I didn't have that kind of confidence. The ones who used to say to me, come and kneel down to pray when there were opposition to my leadership in the movement, these women were the ones who were saying, no, this is the person we think God has called. What was also interesting to note is that these women were not educated by the the real sense of the word, but these women were women who were educated in life. So they understood what leadership was. They could see the trait in me, and they knew. Along the way, today, I tell people that my biggest lesson comes from women all across the world in grassroots community. Women who may never go into the UN for conference, women who may never go to Brussels to the EU, but those women wake up every morning, and every morning they do whatever they can do to transform their community. They should be selfish and say, peace is not going to benefit me. The war should continue because my child may never go to school. I have already been raped. I don't care. But these are the ones when you go to the communities who are chanting for peace, dancing for peace, and sharing. Let me give you an example. In 2014, I was in DR Congo. And this is the moment where everyone from 2013, 12, 13, 14, they had dubbed DR Congo as the rape capital of the world. I go to Congo and I'm sitting there having a meeting with about 100 women who have been sexually violated. And the group that came with me from the West were only concerned about these women telling horrific stories of rape and abuse. Because again, they came with their stereotype. They came with, this is the rape capital of the world. So all they came to hear was sad stories about rape. And these women sat in that room, and yes, they told the story of rape, but then they told the story of sisterhood. That every time they heard that one woman was raped, they came together, collected clothes, collected medicine, collected money, and went to her rescue. So whilst people were thinking, women were saying, I was raped, I was abused, I wanted to die, and the women came, and the women came, and the women came. And then at one point I asked, who are these women? And they said, all of us. There was a network of sisters who were contributing. Who leaves that space and do not be inspired? So every morning I wake up, when I agree to do these Zooms or conferences or go into places and work with women on peace issue, I tell myself I do not represent Leymah. I represent the voices of these women who may never come to New York, but are working harder than I am working to transform their community. So I can go on giving you inspiration, but these 4 or 5 are the inspirations that really propel me into doing what I do.
That is brilliant. I mean, and I think that people who are not into these kind of fancy things are doing and inspiring us much more. Leymah, thank you so much for inspiring further us who are sitting around the tables today and listening to these wonderful stories. Leymah, organizations or organizing yourself and structuring yourself, and you're motivating to build whatever you have, the energy or anger or something like that. You build that and organize that to reach towards a certain goal, right? And Leymah, over the past several years, you had also developed your own organization and reaching out to not only the grassroots, but you had also built your global aura as well. You connected globally. You're a global citizen, right? And then, did you ever thought of first let us know about your organization? What is the latest that you are doing, and then also share with us that did you ever thought of coming out from Africa and moving towards part of Asia? I'm talking about Pakistan, of course, but region like us, where we are standing, where we are,
I mean,
expanding our wings. Did you ever thought of moving out of Africa and reaching out to Asia, for instance?
Farha, you want to put me in trouble because I think the Africans on this call would say they don't get enough of me already. But one of the things that I often say is that I'm extremely blessed. I'm one of those people that I believe God has blessed immensely. And the reason why I say I'm blessed is not because in the wealth of things or whatever. I'm blessed because He has situated me in a place where I work at the grassroots, I work at the national, and then I have the platform at the global. Not many people have those. And so I can go into the communities and interact with 10, 9, 8-year-old girls and boys and listen to their stories all around the world. Take it to their national leaders, leave there and go to the UN and give real anecdote or real stories about how this policy is impacting the lives of people, and it helps to shape some of the policies that we see in the world. So that's a real blessing. I think the one thing that I can say is that I haven't really, Bangladesh, Pakistan are those two areas in your part of the world I haven't spent time. But over the recent years, I've been working with my brother laureate, Kailash Satyarthi in India on his children, his leaders and laureate summit for children. I try to make myself available to him whenever he wants me to come, not because he's a Nobel laureate, but because I feel like this work that we do, especially for the youth and for women around the world, is important for all of us to join hands. It's no longer an option for us to work in silos. It's time for us to really come together. The other thing is that I was in Sri Lanka immediately after the signing of the ceasefire. I don't know if I ever applied for a visa, if I could get it to go back to Sri Lanka, but it was amazing with Visaka and the rest of the women. I'm sure Swanee know Visaka, but these women, and those are the people that gave me inspiration. A vast majority of the activists in that community that I work in are women whose sons are missing in action. But these are people who are still pushing for peace in every term of the world. Recently, we started a program at Columbia University called the Women, Peace and Security Program. We're based at the Earth Institute. And one of the reasons why we set up that program was because I am sick and tired of this constant portrayal of activists as subjects of research. People come into your community, they take your raw data, they turn it into rating material, and all you see is your name credited as interviewee. What we're looking for in this program is beginning to credit women who are at the grassroots level as experts. Because I tell anyone that it's very difficult for anyone to leave, and you ask Swanee from Harvard to write the kind of literatures that they write without the input and insights of grassroots activists. So our program operates with three mindset. One is that peace and security is not just about militarism, but it encompasses human security concern. Two, that peace and security, that the women, peace and security, the whole concept of WPS is not just a global South issue. That WPS is also much needed in the US, in Canada, in Europe, and other parts of the world. The third thing is that the women at the grassroots level are the experts They are experts in the field. So what we're doing at that program is trying to shape the narrative around the work that women are doing at the grassroots level. The other program that I run is the foundation that takes into consideration education. After winning the Peace Prize, I was asked a question. Swanee talked about Norway. And in that room in Norway, as I was getting dressed to go and deliver my Nobel lecture, my good friend, Abby Disney said, "You've won the prize at 39. So what's next? What do you want to do next?" And I just said, education for girls, without even taking it into consideration. And the next thing I know, we started a foundation for girls. And over the last 8 years, we've done girls in parts of West Africa and primarily Liberia. But what is interesting to note that the way people have shifted this narrative to say, if you send a girl to school, you've educated an entire nation or you save her family. Education is not just going to school. I've come to realize that education, for you to be able to educate a girl, you must take all things into consideration. So it has to be a holistic approach, not just throwing money at her and sending her to Harvard. You send a girl to Harvard and leave her parents in a village, she probably will not make it very well because she's worried, she's getting calls that we slept hungry, we did this. So it has to be a holistic approach. If you send her to a private school in your community, you have to consider healthcare, justice issue, and all of the different things. Just as issue arises, you need to be able to meet that. So basically, beyond sitting on all of the different boards in the world, I'm a mediation advisor to the Secretary General. I was recently named as a trustee to Carnegie Corporation, and I feel really humble. I sit on other jury prize group where we look at great work that people are doing. I sit on the Hilton Jury Prize. I sit on the Aurora Prize for Awakening Humanity. So when I say that I'm blessed because I'm able to take my knowledge from the grassroots to the national, but beyond that, also one thing, Farhat, that I must say, and then I will stop so you ask your next question. I realize that I have a voice, and my voice matters in the world just as every individual in this world. And I refuse to cower down. I refuse to be political about justice, be political about women's rights, be political about the truth as I see it. So over time, I have used my voice and my space a lot to speak truth to power, whether it's in Liberia, whether it's at the UN, whether it's other places. I think it's important for all of us to use our agency to transform the world.
Wonderful. Swanee, it's up to you.
Yeah, I'm sitting here looking down because I'm taking notes. Leymah, once again, you are my mentor. Oh, by the way, Farhat, did you notice that when you asked Leymah a while back about mentors, that her face totally changed? I mean, Leymah, you lit up like a Christmas tree. And then you started talking about your grandmother. That gets to the point that you've just made, that it is about individuals. It's not simply policies. It's about individuals. Very, very often, they are women at the grassroots. I'm going to guess that your grandmother was more of a grassroots person than a senator in the Congress.
My grandmother, highest achievement academically was 5th grade. Once she got in the 5th grade, it was time for her to get married. So we're talking 12, 13, 14, and she had her first child. But my grandmother is a revolutionary person because she told us the story that the first time after she had that baby, probably at 15, she got hit by the father of the child. She ran away and left the child with him. And we were like, that's horrible. She said, no, I did not have the resources to take care of that child. I knew he would come back to me, but I had to go and make life for myself. And so as 5 daughters of a mother and 5 daughters of that grandmother, we live in the shadow of a woman who was not afraid to break protocol, who was not afraid to be the odd ones. And so she taught us to speak our mind, but she also challenged us. My sister and I spent a lot of time with her and she challenged us to be the person who accepted everyone. She never tolerated, oh, that person is a witch in the community, or that person is this. She would tell you, I'm taking you to that witch house so you can go and spend some time there and see if they will eat you up. So what education did not teach us, sitting at Ma's feet, and we call her Ma, and I actually just honor her. In a few weeks, it's going to be on Amazon. I hope you all will buy it. I'm publishing a children's book called Ma's Bed. So it's a story about my sister and I spending the night at her place and sleeping in her wonderful bed. But one of the things that I say to anyone is that Ma taught us to hold strong to our faith. She taught me interreligious friendship. She taught me using your skills. She was a traditional birth attendant. So even men who insulted her in the neighborhood, if their wives needed to be delivered at 2 in the morning, she picked up her tools, went and did the work. And we will always say, aren't those the people who were insulting you a day ago? And she said, and so what? That child had nothing to do with it. So really, to say peace and justice and all of the different things that I have learned, I think she contributed a lot. In yes, I am biased when it comes to that old lady. She can do no evil in my eye. I love her to death, yes. Because I feel
And
like
we fell in love with her as well.
yes, I feel like I would not be the radical feminist that I am. The voice that I have would not be as loud as it is if she had not told me you don't need anyone's permission to be pretty, to be smart, to be bold, and to be outspoken. Yeah.
Oh, I love this. I love this.
I love this too. Oh my God.
Yeah. By the way, Leymah, I don't know if you know this, but when this famous Security Council Resolution 1325, it's called, on women, peace, and security, when that was being drafted, and similarly, there was one happening in the United States, and I was a bit involved in those. The first big, long part of it would be, oh, these poor women, oh, wow, what they deal with. Oh, they get raped, their children are killed. Oh, it's just awful what they have to go through. And then it switches over to, oh, and we ought to pay attention to them, right? We shouldn't have a peace talk without them, etc. Well, you know, once you start with telling someone, oh, those poor women, right? It pulls from your heart. And it's so hard to get back to people's brains once their heart is pulled. And so it takes someone like you, Farhat, and like you, Leymah, to say, no, this isn't about, oh, these poor women. This is about, who are the experts? My grandmother is an expert in this. And who are the experts in our lives? I mean, we need to stop and ask ourselves, this isn't about Leymah Gbowee, or no offense, but this isn't about you, right? This is about who we are as we're listening and thinking of the people that we want to honor. And am I living in a way that honors them and where I don't think of them as experts, excuse me, as victims.
But Swanee, if I may jump in for a moment, it's very comical because you only hear those poor women from quote unquote experts who come from outside.
Interesting.
Because if you look at the women and the way they conduct themselves in their community, the last thing they see is themselves as poor. Whether it's in wealth, whether it's in knowledge, whether it's in their intellectual ability, because at the end of the day, the truth is, it is the experts who are being flown into these different conflict contexts that are the poor people. You're poor in knowledge. You don't have the contextual knowledge. You don't have the full analysis of the conflict. You have nothing. What you have is either your international badge or your white car that you're driving, and that's about it. So who gave you the permission to call these people who have survived, lived through, did not have therapists to go to, but they still continue? I'll tell you our story. in the midst of us starting the mass action campaign, there were these two women who used to come from an internally displaced camp every day to work with us. One of the days we created a space, and these were very vocal women. They would speak their mind. They would go out there and really just speak, and they were very committed to the process of peace building. So one day in a small room, we decided, let's have a process of healing, and I'm facilitating that process. And everyone started to tell their story. These two women come together every morning and used to come together every morning and leave together. And one took a deep breath and told her story, that she was raped, but that her sons were made to hold her leg as these fighters raped her one after the other. And she told this story and turned to her friend and said, I'm sorry, I did not tell you this. The friend turned to her and said, I too was raped. But even the point that I'm making is not the sadness. Yes, it was sad that they were raped. But in the midst of their pain, they were still able to come every morning and advocate for peace and advocate for justice. Pray tell me, is that poor? Is that weak? That is the biggest strength and the biggest wealth. Because any expert, trust me, from anywhere in the world with all of the credentials, one incidence of trauma, they're gone. But these women, not just in Liberia, in Cameroon, in Nigeria, in DR Congo, and other places, they are repeatedly seeing and being traumatized and re-traumatized, but they are repeatedly refusing to be poor women. And that's the point that I want to make. When I went to Sri Lanka, those mothers who had lost their sons to gun violence, who were out there advocating for peace and reconciliation, were not poor mothers. Those were the people with all of the wealth. The wealth of humanity resides in those women at the community level. And if you want to talk about expertise, those are the people who actually have the expertise.
Now, Leymah, you mentioned Visakha Dharmadasa without her last name. And of course I know of Visakha, and I'm sure you know the story. She had 3 sons, and the middle one simply went missing during the war with the Tamil Tigers. And she decided she was going to find him. And so she got on a bus and went into the jungle, and she actually slept on the pew, the back pew of a church, until finally mothers came from the Tamil Tigers, and together they created some kind of association to try to find each other's sons. And that is what you're describing to me. It's not about Leymah Gbowee, it's all around the world. And what you have done is you have become the voice of women. You have become like a symbol, not just to other women around the world, but to those fancy people in their white vans who are flying in. And I mean, God bless them. I mean, I was one of them. So I don't mean to be disparaging about people who are trying to help from the outside, but you are so right that it's very hard for us to see a different kind of power. And it's very important that you be that voice, not only to the other women in the world, but to them.
But Swanee, let me just come back in and say, you know, people in war-torn countries are very appreciative of the white cars and the expats flying in. What we don't appreciate, and I'll say we, because I'm inside and outside, what we don't appreciate is the coming in with the idea of, with the perception that everyone in that space have no clue about what they want. That is the biggest mistake that has been made over and over and over and again. I think when people come into these spaces, it should be coming in with an understanding that I came to accompany a group of people on a journey. If I lived through war, if I managed to survive as a 17-year-old child crossing over from the President Doe's side of Liberia to the Prince Johnson side to survive and to look for food for my family, pray tell me, if you came in and said you wanted to help, I at least have some ideas of what I want my life to be. But to come in with plans from New York and DC and Rome and all of the different places without consultation, that is not knowledge. And for me, that is the problem. So in the beauty of appreciation, I'll give another story. During the disarmament in Liberia, the women in Total Bon County had gone in to do disarmament. So we're doing sensitization, we're doing all of the different things. We did not get any help from the UN at the time to say these women could do the work, but the women decided that all of the people that were, because they would get in the helicopter and fly, throw flyers down to say, bring your guns. How many of these boys could read? But some of the places that they were dropping the flyers, people could not even get them. So these women decided they went to the Echo Mill at the time. It was the Gambian troop assigned there, and said to them, drive us halfway and come back. And those women were able to go halfway. The car dropped them. They walk in the bush, knocking pots and pans with white cloth, waving it and saying to the boys, it's time to come out. Isn't that expertise? Or because it doesn't sit in a book in the library of some Peace University, so then it's counted as what? That's the question. And until we begin to turn this around and see expertise as whether it's clay pot, but as long as it's meeting and serving the needs of that community, it doesn't have to be stainless steel.
Yeah, if you'll allow me to put in a plug here, at Harvard, I have, let's say, 35, 40 students in a class, 20 years. At the beginning, I was saying, okay, now we're going to do a screening of this movie, this documentary called Pray the Devil Back to Hell that my friend Abby Disney had made. And I remember the reaction of the women from Afghanistan who were there and the women from Liberia, and how the class got all shaky when the Liberian women were crying and crying about what they were seeing on the screen from the war. And the class was saying to me, stop the film, stop the film. And I said, no, and the Liberian women left the room and they came back and they said, we want to sing a song for this class, Liberia, et cetera, et cetera. And, the class was sitting there and these were UN officials and these were, from all over the world, and their jaws dropped. And that wasn't what they were expecting. They thought these women from Liberia had just fallen apart. And the other thing I wanted to tell you is that the women from Afghanistan, they were also crying. And I said, tell me why you're crying. And they said, you should hear this because it'll mean a lot to you, I think. The women who were living under the Taliban, they said, we thought we had it bad. We thought we had it bad. But what happened in Liberia was so much more. And I want you to hear that. And I want everyone who's watching this webinar to go to Pray the Devil Back to Hell. I can't now, when I'm teaching a class, I can't find anyone who hasn't seen it. Truly, it is probably by far the most well distributed documentary. I have a picture from a few weeks ago. I was in Turkmenistan, which actually exists. And all of these students are wearing these bright, bright veils and these, these caps with all the beads, and they're watching you. They're watching you. These are all master students, and it's Pray the Devil Back to Hell. You're on a big, big screen, and they have tears streaming down their faces. And these are girls in very, very tough situations. So you are those girls. Those girls are you.
And that was the point that I was going to jump into, because everywhere that we've gone, I have been where they screen the film outside of Liberia. People will come to me and say, this is me. I see my sister in that film. I see our movement. Not only do we see the struggles of the war, but we see ourselves and the strives that we're making for peace. And for me, that's where the focus should be, the strides. That's where the focus should be, the efforts. That's where the focus should be, the consistency and people's inability to not want to give up. You know, I know some of these women who have never really benefited, but they're able to respond from one thing to the other, one thing to the other. Someone asked a question immediately when we're starting. How can women peace builders continue their work in this current reality? And I don't think there's any stopping. COVID is a war. It is a war. Who's being impacted? Who are the people who cannot find food? There's a high rate of domestic violence and rape and sexual abuse everywhere. These are the women who are responding to it. Women are the ones in the communities giving out instructions about how to stay healthy and stay safe. The sad thing is, like every other efforts that women make, or every other effort that women make, they don't get the funding. We were recently talking on another Zoom call where people were talking about, so how do we amplify the voices of women? And for me, it was not about amplifying the voices of women at this moment, because women have continued from the onset of 1325, even before 1325, from the beginning of Will, from the beginning of all of the women's movement across, from Jane Addams to everyone. Women have been doing everything. If you read the declaration for when these women were at The Hague, it resonates today. The whole thing about war and the things that are not happening, it resonates today. So women continue to do the work, even in the midst of war, in the midst of pandemic, in the midst of everything. The question now is, where is the political will at the national, regional, and global level to ensure that these women's work, they won't come back and start looking for $100 and $200, and that when they make funding opportunity, they don't put so many red tapes that these grassroots women who are doing this work cannot benefit. How do we translate this current featuring of women? Everyone is talking about the great work women are doing. Enough is enough. How can we translate this into institutional change, into leadership position for these women, into funding for their work, into access to them? These are the questions that we need to ask ourselves. What is happening? We're doing the work. Women are working every day. Whether it's a Swanee hunt, whether it's a Farhat, whether it's a Leymah, whether it's the women in Liberia, Cameroon, or wherever, even in the pandemic, they have not told themselves we're going on a holiday, because they can't afford to. The peace and security work that women are doing in all of these different communities happens to be their insurance policy, but not just insurance policy for them, but for their daughters and their sons, to ensure that they will see and have a future.
Right, right. Gosh, this is, I was just thinking as I was listening about how I'm going to, tonight, I'm going to be writing in my journal, Leymah, because even after all the times of listening to you, you become more clear, more focused, because I think of your experiences. And I would be not doing my job when I think about my journal. I usually write about failures. I have so many books, so many journals about my failures. And would you just give us that glimpse into Leymah Gbowee in terms of some really awful failure that you had? It felt awful at the time, by the way. And what was that like, and what was it about, and how did it shape you? How did it shape this energized, determined woman that I'm looking at right now?
Well, one of the areas that was a very painful thing was we started a movement, an organization years ago, and we decided that we were going to go solo with this organization, and we miscalculated. We thought we had gotten all of the connections we needed, the, the allies we needed. And once we stepped into that space to translate this program into an organization, we got slapped with a lawsuit.
Oh,
Imagine 3 young women without any funding going to start something that they were very passionate about and then being slapped with a lawsuit from a very powerful organization. We mourn over it because this idea of a program wanting to be an organization was actually from one of the women. And she was very sad that this was her intellectual property that she had given to people with the hope. So you have an idea, you give it to a group and say, put this in an incubator. When it's big enough, can you give it back to me like a baby? And you go back for your child and the person say, as long as you give this child to me, now that they're walking, the child becomes mine. It was a painful process, but one of the reasons why till today, the African Women's Development Fund, and to be specific, one of their co-founders, BC Fayami, has become like a sister, is because in the midst of trying to navigate this lawsuit, in the midst of trying to figure out bruised ego, I mean, I think you know what that is, and in the midst of managing the betrayal, the number of people that you thought were there for you and everyone left you all. BC, I will never forget, and this is one lesson I've learned, is standing up for women in this fight, regardless of how I feel, invited me to her office and she said to me, you have it in you. You all can do this, or drop the name. She said, you see, what I see you all fighting for is a rose, but someone calls it a rose and you call it a flower. A rose is still a rose, regardless of what name you called it. And if you change that name, we will give you funds for 3 years to go with whatever organization you want to go with. And that is how we started the Women, Peace and Security Network Africa. But till today, I never operate with the assumption that because I'm cheered by a lot of people, it translates into loyalty or it translates into alliance. That's the first thing. The second failure that I think I have is more personal. 2018 December, we came back from a family vacation. I sit at the dining table and as for the first time, we have all 8 children in the house and we're having lunch. And this is New Year's Eve. And I say to them, what are some of your memories of childhood? And all of my kids start to talk in unison. And I sit in that room and I listen to them. There was not a single memory of me. It was like I was deleted from their memory.
yeah, I get it.
And but it was all about my 2 sisters, my mother, my sister, my mother. And then a few weeks ago, my son has started a podcast. He calls it Premature Adults. And he was interviewing his sisters. And I went to listen to the podcast. And then they started talking about the women in their lives that mentor them to do great things. And I had this broad smile lying on my bed listening to it because of course I expected I was going to get a pat on the back. No. All of the mentorship they receive from women were from women other than myself. And it made me to think that, yes, when I walk around the living room of my homes, I see all the accolades. But it's sad that when these young people write their book about their lives, I'm just going to be a faint memory or the person who provided the resources for their upkeep. And before I used to say that I don't regret. No, I don't regret. But when you're coming to 50 and going beyond, that's what is important is um, family. And so I see that as one of my failures. But the question I need to ask myself is, if I was asked to do it again, would I do it differently? The answer would be a resounding no.
That's so interesting.
Because I feel like what I did in my lifetime has helped for my daughters to not fight some of the fights that I had to fight. That's the first thing. The second thing is that I feel like if I had not done it the way that I did it, I'll probably be a miserable mother. And so I see it as somehow mothering failure if I had to give it a name. But yes, I thought to put that out there because it made me sad, but it has given me a resolve to focus now on my two youngest children more and make more memories with them, whether it's taking them to conferences. My young daughter, who's 11 now, has been to everything. So she's a young feminist. She's visited and been in every peace platform. She can do an analysis of my speeches and say when it's too long or it's too short or it didn't have enough to give the people. But my 8-year-old is the person that I think I need to spend a lot of time with. But those are the two things that I would say to you, Swanee. There are many more, but I'll stop with those two.
Yeah, I mean, there's a scripture, and I won't say it right, but somebody says to Jesus something about, caring for your neighbor, and he pauses and he says, "Well, who is my neighbor?"
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I would ask the question, Leymah, who is your child?
yeah, yeah,
Seriously, I mean, your job as a mom is to keep your kids safe and
yeah,
people that love them.
yeah.
And I get so turned upside down and inside out when we have a family meeting and I say, okay, everybody, I've pulled this meeting together because I took the initiative and let's say anything that's going wrong. And all three of my kids say, here's what's going wrong. You are going wrong. Like,
That that is the worst. And then you know what? When you think you are the coolest thing in the world, they bring you back to reality. I went to Tennessee to speak
yeah.
at Vanderbilt, and I took two of my children with me. We got at the airport, got out of the plane. There were police people waiting, and my son whispered to me, "What did you do again?" And I said, at one point, I forgot that I had the Nobel Peace Prize and that this was the standard protocol. So I'm thinking for a second, am I being arrested? Then I said, oh, I think it's because of the Nobel thing. Let's just go. But in a split second, they were like several feet away from me, like you're on your own. And then this officer now said, welcome, Madam Bowie, to Tennessee. And we get outside, there's this limo, and then we get in the limo, and then they were impressed. Wow, mama, you're living the life. But we don't envy you. So it's almost, sometimes when I'm advising, I have one daughter who's like me, we share the same birth month. When I'm talking to her, she looks at me and say, wow, and the world takes you seriously. And I'm like, wow. But yes, it keeps you humble. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, my story, like 7, 6 years old are saying to you, I mean, what are you doing? Come down.
Yeah. Right.
Yes, it happens.
Well, Farhat, I'm going to turn my part over to you now. I feel like I've had a lot of girl talk now with Leymah, and it's fun.
Oh, I'm loving it. I just wanted to.
I'm a radical feminist, so I can say girl also.
Yeah.
Please do that. Please do that.
I don't think we should be so stuck. I've been reading a lot about legality, and if we become too legalistic about how we call ourselves, it takes the fun out of, and yes, we have to be sensitive, but I think you don't want to be overly sensitive about things, and so it's when you be too rigid, you make a lot of mistakes. I just go with the flow. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, recently when I was looking at your one of the blog which went viral, as you said, you were sitting there with your tub and you were washing clothes.
Oh, please
And
don't
that
remind
was
me.
so,
Farhat.
I mean,
No,
that was amazing because why it makes you so humble. You know, it is the similar thing that you
I
also
I
said in
have
that blog is that there's no protocol, right? It's grassroots.
no.
It's just humanity. You know,
Well,
it's like
but
that.
the other thing that you have to understand is that if you there is this life of being a Nobel Peace Prize winner that is tough. It's if you're like me, it's difficult to navigate because you go to places and there's all this protocol about and security. So one of the things that I often say I don't need like bodyguards. Last year I was in Ecuador, and I was in Ecuador in the midst of the protest. So, of course, I get there and I have two people with AK-47 following me everywhere. And it was very, very uncomfortable because I did not feel like I needed that kind. It draws a lot of attention. So when I come home, when you will rarely find me going to sophisticated places to do my hair. I'm currently in Ghana and I live outside of the city because we came when the lockdown happened. But I leave from here and go about an hour away to a tiny hair salon where no one knows who I am. These girls have been doing my hair forever. And I sit there and we chat and we joke. And I remember one of them saying to me, Mommy, I feel like you're a powerful person, but you pretend when you come here. And I said, No, I'm just a wife to my husband and mother to my children, because it's not like I'm not grateful for where God has brought me, but I just want to be me. I just want to live in a moment where I'm free to, and these girls afford me the opportunity to see into their lives and understand. Like recently, we're talking about the economics of their life and how much they make on a monthly basis. And to be honest, I actually go there to make it better because I know when I'm leaving, it's better for them. So washing my clothes and during the lockdown is another thing that has this whole COVID period. The one lesson that I've learned is that the one thing that is certain is your humanity. And if you lost that along the way because of protocol, or lost that along the way because of job title, or lost that along the way because of anything, then you're at a miserable place, because this place that we find ourselves is calling all of us to be humble, to not be important, because importance have not solved anything for any of us. And so I just really and truly, to be honest with you, I love my life. I love the simplicity of my life. I don't do very well with all of the protocol and the high profile.
Yeah,
We recently called, when they came to do our COVID test here, we had to call the office of the president here. And his special assistant said, "How long have you been here?" And I said, "Well, we've been here since March." And he was like, "Wow. And you have not alerted the authorities that you're in this country?" And I said, "No, because the president has a lot on his plate and you government officials are working overtime. I am less problem to worry about, because the truth of the matter is I don't want to draw unnecessary attention to myself." And
yeah,
so if I'm in the community working, I love that. If I
yeah,
have to walk the corridors of the UN, I go and do what I have to do and jump out. And then I'm in Harlem looking for something to cook for my children. So
Mhm.
um, that's the life. That's the life for
yeah.
her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lemma, for this wonderful. I mean, this is so inspirational always. not only to hear you, to know about your work, but these complexities that COVID has created for all of us. What does that international community or we us all to consider, and when we develop those programs or policies that can be helping, and in these complex situation where we are right now in pandemic, how the complexities of crises and conflict has changed, and what should we do to adapt ourselves, because as you said, we women are facing, we're working daily, we are not on holiday, right? So this pandemic has given us more challenges, and especially when you are looking at the crises and conflicts, what should we do all together?
Well, I mentioned earlier that it's time for us to absolutely object the silos mode. We can't work. It's this what this is teaching us is this is a moment for networking. This is the moment for partnership, because also if you look at the work that we do as women, I mentioned it also, we rarely have the resources. And so if you want to work like like by yourself, you spend more. If you join forces with other groups that you share similar values and virtues with, it stretches the work further and does a lot more for it. In the period whilst we're battling COVID, you have conflicts still happening in different parts of the world. And so it's like double trouble for women who work in some of these different places. So I think avoiding the silo mode. Recently, and one of my sisters here is on this thing. I see her, Amina Saliu. They invited me to Nigeria to launch their sex offender registry. And at that time, I had the opportunity to sit with some people from the EU, and they were talking about the competitive way in which women's organizations go after funding or the way they do their operations. And I told the ambassador that I'm sorry, but the criteria for grants makes it easy for women's organization to fight, because the criteria you put, it's a criteria that is not in favor of partnership, but is usually a criteria that winner takes it all. What I would love to see moving forward post-COVID is that when donors are putting grant opportunity or funding opportunity out, that they say, okay, if Farhat is based in the capital of Pakistan, you qualify for this grant if you're partnering with another organization in a rural area. So if donors were encouraging partnership between urban and rural and urban, we will see more network, we'll see more partnership, and to that extent, we will see more efficient and effective impact of the work that women are doing. That's something that I would really love to see.
Yeah, wonderful. So, Swanee, your last question, and then we'll open, because there are a lot of questions that are coming over from participants as well. Your question from Leymah, if you want.
No, Farhat, I want to hear more of people who are calling in, because they're not getting enough chance, because I'm talking.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a lot of questions are coming. One question that I will read for Leymah as well is that, how can we bridge this reality of amazing grassroots women all over the world who know how to make and build peace with those policymakers who still don't listen to the valuable resource? What can we do to make such connections to not only inspire but change policy and influence actions on the ground?
Well, I think I had a cynical response to that, but I'm going to not say. I think one of the ways we can do this is really to begin to encourage partnership between academic institutions, policy institutions, and grassroots organizations at an equal level. Gone are the days where policy institutions, academic institutions should be inviting grassroots women to come and be trained. It's time for that kind of interaction to cease. It's time for grassroots women to come around the table with policy and decision makers, with people in the space to say, let's have a conversation on our needs. Let's have a conversation on how to move from point A to point B. Farhat, you've been in this movement for a long time. Women at the grassroots level are overly trained, they are overly networked, they are overly whatever you want to call it, they're over conferenced and workshopped. It's time for them to sit at the table and have meaningful conversations with policymakers and be involved in the formulation of policy. As part of our program at the university at Columbia at the Earth Institute, one of the things that we do with our women is to work with them to formulate policies around the issues that they're working on. So recently we had the Coast Women from Kenya sit and do a paper around violent extremism and the role of women in ending violent extremism. This is their idea. This is what they are doing. The time now to take that document from the laptop, from them, and start to distribute with policymakers and making appointments to see, let's talk about this. I think that's something that we should do. But until the mindset of policymaker has been transformed about the intellectual ability of grassroots women, we will continue to see, feel, and hear the way we do today.
Another question, which is a very amazing one, is that how can we build local women peace builders or local women builders without depending on foreign funding? How can we do that?
Well, the one question I will put back to that person is to go back and ask the local women how they're doing their work without foreign funding. Because a lot of these organizations, for example, I'll give another example. Julienne Lusange in DR Congo have something that she calls the Fund for Congolese Women. And what Julienne does is to source resources from within Congo, from wealthy Congolese, from people who are sympathetic to the cause of women or empathetic to the cause of women, and they contribute their quota. And what she does with these 5,000, 1,000, 2,000 is distribute them to local women organizations so that they do their work. I'll come back to us in Liberia. When we started the mass action campaign, what people see on Pray the Devil Back to Hell, we started with $10 from someone's bag. And for the entire time of our movement, a lot of the money we got was raised locally from different groups of people. So it is doable. But the other thing we need to encourage is private partnership between grassroots women. And so if you have a big business person, it's time for these women to start engaging them and sitting with them and talking about the benefits of peace and why these private enterprise need to invest in these grassroots women venture for peace and security in the different communities. Some people are doing it, but we need to really amplify it so that it's out there and people are doing it more and more.
Excellent. And the question is about the pandemic, and what do you think about the pandemic and the uptick of the conservative socio-political trends, which will seriously, hamper the progress achieved by the women globally, especially in this scenario when you are, in the pandemic. It's really hampering us to move forward as women, as a movement or something like that. The question is about how the progress can be achieved.
In every pandemic, in every crisis, there's an opportunity. And there is not a one-size-fits-all answer to this question. The one thing that people need to look at is the context. What context do you work in? You do your contextual analysis and tell yourself, this is what is going to work in this moment, and this is what is not going to work in this moment, and how do we push this forward? Let's take Liberia, for example. Today, we're not at war. The COVID is raging. There are many groups doing COVID awareness. But what is also raging is the sexual and gender-based violence is at its real high peak. So what is important now is that people think, oh, we're going backwards based on the level of rape that is happening in the country. What we could do is to begin beyond the advocacy, because I applaud a lot of women's organizations, young women who are out there in the forefront advocating for, justice for rape victims. But that is not enough. I was talking to a lawyer recently, and one of the things she said was that, yes, we have a rape law, but it says 12 to life. It's not very clear to say if you are arrested, what should happen. So some judges decide, we'll put this person in for 1 year, for 6 months, for 9 months, and then they're walking free. So we need to do a review of the law. So What we need to happen right now, the opportunity that exists, and I'm talking about the opportunity in the midst of the pandemic. We are not traveling. A lot of people are not going to conferences. All of the experts are at home. How do we now begin to call meetings to say, let's talk, work with the female lawyers to see how we can review this? How do we work with the Judiciary Committee at Parliament to see how they can change the way these things are happening so people do it differently? Let's step up our advocacy. Let's set up a little fund internally to help people who need legal services fee and all of the different things. Those are opportunities, because you can't say, oh, I want to be a part of this, but I have to travel to this conference. That's the opportunity. Everyone is at home.
Yeah, one question is that what does peace mean to you?
Oh my God. Well, I know one thing for sure. Peace is not the absence of war. I see peace as the presence of every condition that dignifies you and myself. So think about it. Every condition that dignifies you and me. Peace is the presence of those conditions. Food, housing, healthcare, education, justice, the presence of every condition that dignifies you and I, that makes you to think that you have a future and you can contribute. That is peace.
Now, you know, Lema, it reminds me of one of the women with whom I work in Kenya. And you know very, very well the situation where there are kids who can't get back after school because it's too dangerous, go back to their homes. So they congregate around the street lamps. And this is very familiar to us. And so one of the mothers was saying to me, so what does it matter to me if my daughter is raped and dies of AIDS, or if she's shot to death with a bullet, right? She's dead. She's dead. And that's what I think of with what you're saying about what is peace and how broad is it. And that story has just stayed with me so vividly when I thought about the angst that mother has to feel because it's so pervasive. Well, let me ask you, Leymah, if we were going to wrap this up, and if there were a story, you've told us probably a dozen stories at this point, which is what has made the conversation so extraordinarily unforgettable. Can you close us with a story that creates a lesson, but also an image that we're going to remember for a long time, and we're going to associate it with you as the person who is so deeply connected, not just to the story, but to us now?
Wow, Swanee, that's a huge task to perform right now, but I'm trying to roll it in my head. So I would love to go back to the story of my sisters in Congo. Because whilst everyone in that room, the foreign women, a lot of women from the US was on that delegation with me. And they kept asking questions of, how many times were you raped? And I had a notebook. I carried these brown notebooks that I often take from Abby's office and my office in New York with pens. I'm obsessed with it. I feel like when I'm old, it will sell on eBay for a lot of money. People would buy thinking they would get something good out of it. Then they realized I was actually crazy. So I'm writing in this notebook, and the women came, and I'm doing a spiral. I'm doing a spiral, and I'm doing a spiral. But one after the other, every foreign expert in that group with me questioned those women about the rape and the intensity of the rape.
Right, right.
And then I said, wait, I hear something. Who are the women And they said, us. I said, I keep hearing, and the women came. Who are the women? And they said, us.
Mm-hmm.
And this girl stands up. She had a cute baby that I had taken. And this baby, she said she was dragged into the gold mine, the diamond mine, or whichever mine. And she was repeatedly raped for 6 months. And she blacked out. She doesn't remember anything. When she opened her eyes, she was in the hospital. And they told her she was pregnant. And she wanted to die. And the women came. And they helped her heal. And one other woman took her and kept her and counseled her. And the women kept coming and counseling her. And she gave birth to this baby. Now she makes her business. And she also counsels other women that have been raped. And so I turned to the group sitting there and said, you keep reinforcing the rape and the stories of horror. But there's a lesson here for all of us that even in the midst of their pain, these women are united in an effort to save each other. They've come together with their collective humanity and they spread it out to one another. Please, and I turn to the journalists, when we go back from here, let the narrative not be that Congo is the capital of rape. Let the narrative be that this is the capital of sisterhood. And Swanee, if you look even in the US today and other places that are not highlighted, this is how community works.
Mm-hmm.
People are tapping into their inner pain and bringing out love in ways that we've never seen. Unfortunately for the world that we live in, we are so fixed on the narrative of pain and division and hate. It is time for us to transform that narrative into the narrative of love and justice and sisterhood. And so if you ever imagine a place where you think this is the capital of child soldiers, go there and think again. Because even in the midst of child soldiers, it could be the capital city of brotherhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, wow, Swanee, this is such an. I mean, I'm just in that story right now. I mean, this is so brilliant. Thank you so much for being here. I mean, and sharing such a different persona. Of course, we follow you and seeing you on regular basis and study you. I mean, not study, kind of follow you on regular basis and reading your blogs and work. I mean, this is so inspiring. I think that many people who are here in the room right now with us will really resonate, and they will definitely be inspired. So, I mean, this can go endless, but you know, there's always good things. It's just an end, but a new beginning for all of us who are sitting around the table. And you must know that how I got inspired and began looking after and you know, begin waiting for this moment to meet Lama like this, and you know, be with Swanee like that. I mean, this is so amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, this was another inspiring conversation with great inspiration for all of us who are young, who are leaders, who are there somewhere listening to us across the world. This is so amazing that we should all tonight will be resonating with Leymah in her work, and of course Swanee, would you like to say a few words before I sign off, before I thank everybody? Would you like to say anything?
No, my heart is so full. My heart is so full. I don't want to take away from this experience. I already know what I think. I don't have to hear myself.
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much, Leymah, for taking the time out. I'm sure, I know that, you know, there's a lot of challenges that you're facing. Of course, your own work and the family level. We pray that everything goes well with at your home. And of course, Leymah, thank you so much for taking the time out and be with us. Thank you so much, Swanee, also for you know, supporting and of course sharing with this humble being. And I'm so honored. This will last forever. And ladies and gentlemen, this is our 20th conversation that we are having, and we'll come up again with some another amazing moment from across the world, especially from the grassroots, as we always share that, you know, we value those people who are working and changing the changing the world around us. Global Women Insight is sharing those stories who are stories of women who are shaping and changing the lives of us all, not only in the past but in present, and who will be doing that in future. Will come up again. Thank you so much for your participation, your questions. They will be there. We'll put this podcast there in our YouTube channels in different levels. You will get to see this again. And thank you so much, everybody. And good night from Pakistan. And again, good evening from Washington and Ghana. Thank you so much, Leymah. Thank you so much, Swanee. Thank you so much, everybody. Good night.
Thank you, Farhat. Big kiss to you and Swanee.
Yes.